the Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abassi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And I hope you all had a pleasant Easter. I decided to take the day off because I can. Today, I wanted to talk about a story that I don't really talk about. I thought it was good to share with you some of the examples that I experienced towards the end of my drinking that were uh, kind of left me with feelings of shame and guilt. And I still don't like to talk about it, which means I should. So, towards the end of my drinking, I worked for a family business. And we were doing really well. It was my dad and my brother. And hi, dad and brother, if you're listening. I'm just going to talk about like my experience from the time that I was working at home and how my disease really grew exponentially during that time. Um, I hope that in sharing this, that it's not leading to feelings of, oh, if she never worked from home, she wouldn't have ended up this way. She would have. She would have ended up this way because when I ended up going into like leaving that business eventually and going to a new one, things just continued to get worse regardless of where I didn't have to be home for it to get worse. So, with that being said, during this time of my life, I was working from home. My kids were in high school and I would drink until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I would wake up at 7-ish and see my kids off to school, whatever that meant, whether that meant we were rushing because I woke up late and I had to drive them to school, or I was trying to get them out of bed, like whatever that looked like, it was not pleasant. We'll just say, to say the least, it was not pleasant, I don't think, for any of us. I do feel some guilt about that time in my life as a parent. I didn't come through. I wasn't teaching punctuality. I wasn't teaching a lot of things that I think were important for young adults. Well, I guess they weren't young adults yet, teenagers, to be that they should be taught during that time. So then during that time, I also took quarterly trips to the headquarters, which was based in Reno, Nevada. And prior to that, taking these quarterly trips to Reno, Nevada, um, my brother was there. And as I would get to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning, I would go straight to the bar and I would have some vodka and orange juice, 3 if I could fit them in before my plane came. And then I would be pretty hammered on the airplane and I would continue to drink on the airplane. I have a memory of getting very vocal on the airplane. I think I was taking video. I'm not quite sure, but it was a morning flight that I was doing that. And I don't remember anybody telling me I needed to be quiet. I remember the person beside me kind of humoring me, but um, it wasn't pleasant when I think back to it. That might have been the same flight that once I got to the airport, I went to the bar. And meanwhile, my brother was outside waiting for me because my airplane had landed. So he was quite livid when I finally got to the car because he said, you know, what took you so long? Well, I stopped to have a drink at the bar. Um, that was one of the few times that I arrived on a Sunday when I didn't have to go directly into work, and that's probably why I drank a little more than I normally would. And so I remember him being really, really mad at me. I remember um, taking their kids out to like just play outside and hike around in the yard and play on the trampoline and stuff because I was fun Aunt Rachel, you know. But that's not what I was. I was drunk Aunt Rachel and I I made my amends with my brother and my brother shared with me how happy he just was to see me sober and being able to do this thing called sobriety. And it went really well, but there were a lot of mistakes along the way before I got to that point. Like after my brother and my dad sold the company to a larger corporation, um, they had retired and I was still working for the company. And at that point, I really sank into a depression, really, because I felt like my employment with them was not just a job. It was an experience that I was gifted. You know, I saw it as an opportunity to get closer to my dad and my brother in a way that I never would have otherwise. And I wanted so badly for them to see that I was smart. I wanted so badly to make like this huge impact on the company. And and meanwhile, I'm just drinking. I'm drinking while I'm working. And I'm drinking when I go on these quarterly trips. And I was setting myself up for failure. I was never going to be that thing that I strived to be when I didn't take any action to that aligned with that. Um, so when my brother and my dad retired, I kept doing my quarterly visits, but my brother was no longer there. And I remember my first trip to the headquarters when my brother had been gone and they had moved and everything. I remember just crying. I just remember crying. I couldn't stop crying. The whole time I was there, I was so depressed. And I didn't talk about that. I never talked about that with my dad and my brother. That that sadness showed itself as anger. And I talk all the time about how we have this color wheel of emotions and what seems like anger can actually have a different root emotion. And in that situation, the anger was rooted in sadness. I was sad. I was sad that I had lost this relationship. That's how I saw it. I was sad that I lost this relationship with the two most important men in my life. And I was never going to get it back. And for you lifetime listeners, you know that I talk all the time about fear of abandonment. And during this time, that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was abandoned. Um, it had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with the job. It had to do with a relationship that was flourishing. That's what I thought. And I think we did get closer in a lot of ways. But then it was gone. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. And I was never gonna get an opportunity like that again. Um, and that's when I stopped caring so much about my impact on the company. It became a job. It was a family business and it became a job. Um, and the wine became more important than the job until the wine became more important than my bills, than my mortgage, than food. I during that time was very slender. I was underweight. I didn't eat barely at all. Um, I remember for a long time I only ate a piece of bread and an apple in the evening. And I recall having a bagel with cream cheese in the morning. And that's it. That's all I could stomach. Because I was so overwhelmed with anxiety that I just couldn't put food in my body. It would make me sick to even think about food. So I lost a lot of weight and my digestive system was just failing. Not to get into specifics, but it was to the point where there was something really wrong with me. And there were times that one time I missed my flight home because I was up drinking. Um, I missed my flight home to my kids because wine was more important. Um, I felt so alone. And even though my brother had expressed concern, my job had expressed concern, I really felt like I was alone and declining, and there was no way to be saved. So fast forward, there's a big mush of time that is kind of difficult for me to remember. The period of time where I was working at that business and my brother and my dad were no longer there is really a blur for me because I used to stay up, like I said, until like 4 in the morning, get up at 7, get the kids to school, whatever that looked like. And then I would go back to sleep until the headquarters would open, which they were on the West Coast. So that was 11 o'clock until I kept sleeping past 11 o'clock. And um, my boss would call me and I wouldn't answer, or I'm sure he could tell I was super groggy, you know. So there was a lot of mess, and I don't recall how much I accomplished during that time. I'm sure I did the easy stuff, but I certainly was no longer striving to make an impact. And that is something I thrive off of. I always, when I'm at a company, I want to make an impact, a big, gigantic impact. And and that's a great goal to have as long as my actions align with that. And they no longer did. And eventually everything, just the bottom just fell out. And I had to go to detox. Um, this is around the time when I had looked in the mirror and said, whispered to myself that you're already dead. And that's when I ended up going to detox, like getting a bed and um and going to detox. That wasn't my last drunk, but it was the beginning of a real serious effort to try to put down the drink. Um, and you guys have heard much of the rest of the story many times, but today I was reminded of just because I put down the drink, that's how tragic of a tailspin that I was in. And somehow I was able to put down the drink, go to detox again for the second time. And today I am this person that I would never recognize back then. I would have never been able to recognize who I am. I wouldn't have even believed it if you told me that, okay, when you are 50, you are going to be um, going to sobriety meetings every morning. You're going to have had a stroke. Of course, we can't leave that out. You're going to be hosting a podcast. You're going to listen to the Bible, and in tandem, you're going to be reading the Recovery Bible just to make sure that you ingest it well. You're going to be crocheting and painting, and you know, you're going to feel a wholeness that you've never felt. Um, that that chasm in the middle of my chest is gone. I can get it back if I fall away from my program. That will return. And in order to keep it closed up, um, I do all of these things. I go so far as to see a psychiatrist once a week as well, because I'm really, really vulnerable to having that chasm open back up and suck me in. Um, I was reminded this morning in one of my meetings how everybody looks and acts so differently that is in recovery. Um, Different races, backgrounds, everything. We're all so different, and yet we all have the same disease. Our experiences in our lives with the disease are also different, but they rhyme. That's something I hear one of my friends in sobriety, he says all the time. Our experiences may be different, but they rhyme. And that's so true. Like our bodies are just a vessel for this disease to live and thrive. And as long as we take the medicine and we join together to fight it, we can keep it at bay. Um, what I hear all the time also is I get a daily reprieve. Uh, Towards the end of my drinking, I also heard this again this morning. Towards the end of drinking, I didn't get into difficult situations every time I drank, but every time I was in a difficult situation, I was drinking. And when I missed that airplane, I had been drinking. I was still drunk, honestly. When I showed up late, 2 hours late to work when I was on a business trip, I was drinking. Like that stuff didn't happen if I wasn't drinking. Um, Even though every time I drank, that stuff didn't happen. And that's why I kept drinking, because um, it didn't happen all the time until it did happen all the time. And I just kept repressing what was inside of me, ignoring it. And it was just becoming stronger and stronger. It's like my understanding, and which is minimal, of a black hole. It like just grows in strength. These power, these illnesses inside of us, if we don't look at them, they grow more powerful. Um, I have to look at it morning, day, and night. Um, I can't think of my life without my program. I have nothing if I don't have my program. Um, it's it's what keeps me waking up. It's what keeps me brushing my teeth. It's what keeps me eating. My program isn't just making sure that I don't drink again. It's making sure that that chasm remains closed, and that my actions in life can align with my desire to have an impact. And when I show up here and I hit record, it's my greatest effort to try to have an impact. And that impact is driven by my experiences, because I know that you might not have had a family business, but you have family. We get into situations with our family that are difficult, where other family members aren't always going to be making decisions that we feel are best for all of us, but they're making decisions that are best for them. And depending on my physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness, I can handle it or not. And back then, I couldn't. I couldn't deal with the what was being presented to me. I couldn't deal with life. Life was unmanageable to me. I wasn't dealing with something that nobody in the world had ever experienced, but I was dealing with something that was just completely out of reach for me emotionally. I had no idea what to do. And I'm really sad for that woman that that was so lost. But I know today that with the tools of my program and through communication, I'm able to build up those that ability to respond to life no matter what happens. Respond to life on life terms. I can do that today, but I don't have to do it alone. I can do it with you. I can do it with the people in my program. I can do it with my family. Today, I have a beautiful relationship with my family. It is so much better than it ever was. And I know that down the road, I am going to be able to continue to nurture that relationship as long as I don't pick up a drink, and as long as I continue to keep coming back and practicing my program in all my affairs. So thanks so much for listening today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.